right. Well, we've
Um,
got a few minutes after. Do we want to go ahead and get started? Are you recording, Molly?
yes, we are recording, and the recording will
Perfect.
be shared out after this, just so everyone knows. So yeah, as we wait for more people to join, I'll just go ahead and introduce the session. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us at O'Donnell Learn for today's webinar, Building Learning Communities in the Classroom and with Faculty. My name is Molly Butler, and I'm a marketing manager here at O'Donnell Learn. Our session today should be about an hour, including Q&A and interactive discussions. You will notice a chat button on the bottom of the screen. I see that some of you already are, but please feel free to continue introducing yourselves in that area. Also use the chat throughout the session to share comments with the entire group and put any questions you have in that space as well. Today's hosts are O'Donnell Learn's Carrie O'Donnell and Dr. Brett Christie. Carrie is our founder and CEO, and Brett is our Director of Learning Design. So with that, I'll hand it over to Carrie and Brett to get us started with today's session.
Awesome. All right, thanks, Molly. We're being polite. Who's gonna speak next?
Well,
I guess you want me to take it, Carrie, for a second?
Yeah, you take it. We'll introduce ourselves. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, just quick introduction. Hi, everybody. Brett Christie, and I'm Director of Learning Design here at O'Donnell Learn. Been in that role since July, and prior to that, almost 25 years in higher education, primarily with the Cal State University system. Went up through the faculty ranks, originally teacher education, dabbled in faculty development, then dove in head first at the campus level and then the system-wide level on all sorts of efforts related to quality, equity, diversity, universal design, course redesign, faculty learning communities on many topics. So I'll turn it over to Carrie now.
Well, I'm Brett's partner in crime, and the two of us have a lot of fun doing these webinars together. And Brett is an amazing leader of our design team, and he puts the community and humanity into everything we do. And so I'm really excited to be talking today about building learning communities because it's so important to our company. I started O'Donnell Learn when I was in my 20s, 30 years ago. And we have about 150, a team of about 150 design professionals. And around the world, we're a virtual company, have been for since 30 years. And we are just really committed to improving the way the world learns and in a really human and collaborative way. And so you'll see here, we always like to share our resources to the world. And today's gonna be very interactive, so get ready to use your dialing fingers, your typing fingers. Brett, to you.
Awesome. I'll jump us forward. I will point out one thing related to chat, as somebody pointed out. By default, the chat function is set up to go to panelists only. You want to select panelists and attendees, and then it'll go across the whole group, unless there's something you want just for the panelist group. But panelists and attendees would be great. Okay, so let's dive in. Session overview. We're going to talk about classroom as community, then how you can take it beyond the classroom, keep that continuing on a particular purpose, let's say. We'll talk about specific high impact practices and how those support community and advancing students' knowledge and ability, and even how they may serve a particular topic or function. And then we'll go to professional learning communities where we'll look at the faculty and staff opportunities related to working together, building communities, and advancing. Okay, so let's do a check-in, thinking about the importance of fostering student communities. So what benefits can you think of? And you've got the link in the chat, and I see it flying by pretty quickly. So go ahead and grab that link. That'll open your browser and you'll join here. You'll see this answer garden, which may be new to some of you, but this is a very simple way where you can have students or participants come in and just put a few words related to benefits of fostering student community. And you can enter as many things as you want, but these will be very succinct. You'll have 20 characters or less. So go ahead and start putting in some responses here. Benefits of fostering student community. And this is where you can get a sense where the group is, get a consensus. Create a community. Got cut off on the character limit. Sorry about that. Creating community. Support and inclusivity. Awesome. Let's see how this continues to grow. Again, you can put in multiple. Ah, there we go. Love that. Two things that we'll be talking about very much today: support and inclusivity, peer learning, passion. I love that. Always love seeing that affective domain. We'll talk about that. Empathy, always great. Engagement. Reducing stress. Yeah, let's talk about that. And we can talk about that at the student level and also at the professional learning community level. I think that's a great one. And then social learning, let's give it one last refresh here.
Cool.
Reducing stress is coming up there. And you've probably seen all of the stories about overload, workload, stress, mental health and wellness. That is so critical. Trauma help I see now popping up. Cultural competency, great. Increased retention. Awesome. Love it. All right, one last refresh and out of there.
We love Answer Garden. One of the things we do in all of our webinars and everything we do is we try to model the kind of community building and the kind of engagement that we that we encourage faculty to use in their classroom. So.
Sorry, pausing there as I was typing. So let's go ahead and jump back to the presentation. I just put in the link to Answer Garden in general, and that is a free tool that you can use unlimited. So feel free, there are some great ways that you can do that. So go ahead and explore a little bit and I'll jump us back to the session. All right, Carrie, take it away. Classroom is community.
Okay, so so actually, when you think about it, the first place to start building community is right in your classroom. And there's so many ways to do it, and it is so important to do. But the thing about it is that it requires that you think about all the different learning domains and all the different aspects of your personality and brain. And so we're going to just walk through really quickly. You know, the no-brainer, next one, Brett, is your cognitive domain. You know, yours and your students, right? Comprehension, synthesis, recollection. This is Bloom's taxonomy right there. And in order, you know, that is a really important thing in the classroom, but it's something that many faculty rely on most heavily in their creating of learning experiences. And what we find is that the other two domains are equally or maybe even more important. So the next one is what they call the affective domain. And Brett has taught me that word, affective domain, but I intuitively already understood it, which is really that you have to tap into the emotional side of you, into motivation, into your values, stereotypes. This is the part of the domain of learning that is where your expert blindness might come out, and you have to really kind of tap into that to understand where are your blindnesses and how do you create that motivation for your faculty, for your students, and in order to build community. And then the last one that we sometimes forget is the psychomotor domain. And that's really your actions and doing. It's perception, it's movement, it's adaptation, it's learn by doing, which is such a motto at O'Donnell. And so when you put all three of those together, it sets the baseline for building community in your classroom. So, so what are the most important things when you build a community in your classroom? And the first thing is, so you want to make your class a community. So we call it class as community. So you have to do that intentionally. It just doesn't come naturally. And it starts from day one, and it starts with you showing and modeling vulnerability. So if you don't do something well, or you do something wrong, or you make a mistake, it's actually a really great thing for building community because it gives students permission not to be perfect all the time. One of the things we talk a lot about at O'Donnell is universal design for learning, and Brett is the expert in that, very expert in that. And but you know, the main message of universal design for learning is providing multiple means of expression, of engagement, so of representation. And what you want to do is you want to give people multiple ways to do things, because that helps to bring out each individual in their way, and that really does help you to build your community. And also setting norms and modeling best practices. So one of the norms and best practices that we go we think highly about is creating a welcoming environment. No, you can move on, Brett. It's creating a welcoming environment for your student. So really creating a strong, welcoming video that shows your passion. Why are you passionate? Putting a little article or essay in your syllabus about why you teach this course and why you're passionate about this, about your area of teaching and research. We also use a tool a lot called Flipgrid to help to build community. It's a really easy tool for anyone to use, even if they don't have great Wi-Fi, because they can use it on their phone. They basically, you can ask them to talk about what is it they want to get the best, most out of the class, or what is an experience that they've had that nobody in the class has. Anything you want, you can have them talk into Flipgrid. Everyone speaks, you speak, and you all see each other's personality coming out, and that really helps to build community. So these are kind of some of your basic ways to build community, but then there are practices that you can bring into the course that'll enable you to build community. And I know that a number of you have been to our webinar before. Brett, I think we can go to the next one. To several of our webinars, and we often talk about, I mean, these are things that we are deeply passionate about, are active learning and bringing students together in the learning experience. So one of the things we can, yeah, and Brett, maybe you could talk a little bit about class size in a few moments. But one of the things that we do intentional online interactions. We do breakouts that don't have to be facilitated. We do think, pair, share, which can be done in both, it can be done in chat as well as for larger classes, or it can be done also in breakout rooms where you actually ask students to think about a problem, and then each of them to share out with each other and discuss their take on it. And then if you have a smaller class, come back and share out to the overall class. We also use Padlet a lot to create these interactions. One of the things we like to do are authentic and active learning projects. And these are often kind of project-based activities where you break students into group. You give students a formal role, and each student in the group has a role. One of the ones that I like a lot are something our team did at VCU last year, where it was an intelligence course for a Homeland Security program. And they broke all the students into groups, and each group had to present the president's daily brief each week. And they used video and examples of previous president's daily brief to teach them what that was. Students were given different threat areas to research, and then each week one group brought all the threats from around the world as if they were giving it to the National Security Advisor, to the president. It was a pretty cool project. And last week at the AACMU conference, we were talking, I was in a session on online learning in the arts. And, you know, it was really struck me how different people in the session use the arts really creatively. So they allow their students to express themselves artistically as one of their multiple means. And it's a really great way of building community to allow them to work together on an artistic project, a rap, or a performance, or a written piece, or a drawing. So those are just kind of some of them. Brett, I'd like to ask you to talk a little bit, because you spent so many time at Cal State where there were some really large classes. What techniques do you have for that?
Yeah, one that came to mind that I tried to share in chat, but it's hard to sometimes in text for Amy and others is, you know, if you can take that very large class, and let's say you're using Canvas as your learning management system, you can use the groups feature in Canvas to actually break students up into groups. And then you can have the whole course that you're using for certain functions and activities, but then you can also have the students broken up into groups where they might do their own continued engagements and activities, assignments, meetings, whatever they might produce. So those are some ways I'd say you can easily try and manage or chunk students into smaller communities rather than thinking, okay, I have 300, there's no way I'm going to be able to know what they're doing, have them be able to focus, have them be able to form connections and bonds with each other and learn from each other. So I think if you could break it down into those smaller communities, it could be,
we also
I'd say,
oh, I'm sorry.
Right there. 20 or less. I mean, ideally 10 or less, but if you've got over 300, then, you've got to balance how many communities you're going to try and manage and check in on and facilitate, and assign those community groups different types of roles and make sure that you build in process and accountability as well.
That's great, Brett. I so agree with you. I think part of it's structure, putting a structure, making structured activities that they're doing, structured dialogue, structured conversations, putting some structure around it, and then, you know, that process. And also let them self-regulate themselves, which I know that a lot of you have done and have found to be very successful. We also use Padlet a lot, and Google Docs and Google Sheets can be used for communities for managing a dialogue within a community. Let's go on to the next one. So I guess one thing is just, anyone have any other questions? You know, we could go deeply, because as learning designers, we do a lot of community building in the classroom. But what we were thinking is that it's really important to build student learning communities across the campus. And this is ultra important in today's world where where so many of us are virtual, right? And students don't have that face-to-face. And so creating that community and that presence with each other is really, really important, and finding ways for them to learn. So the first thing I'd like to just speak to for a moment are high impact practices. And I just wonder in chat if you guys could just mention any of high impact practices that you use on your campuses. So a typical high impact practices are first year experiences, first year service learning experiences the week before school starts, first year experiences where students are cohorted together and take some courses together and or live together, undergraduate at graduate research, community-based projects, capstone experiences for grades. And we'd love to hear what kind of different types of high impact practices. And while you're writing them down, I'd just like to say that there is a lot of research, a ton of research that show that HIPs improve the quality of students' experience, learning, retention, and success, and particularly for underserved students. HIPs that are associated with outcomes such as improved graduation rates and narrowed achievement gap between racial and ethnic groups. And if you want to learn more about it, the AAC&U has the best site on it. It collects research, guidelines, practices for that. So we're seeing quite a lot of HIPs being used in this group. A lot of first year seminars, undergraduate research, e-portfolios. I forgot that one. Thank you, Stacy. Capstones, community projects. You know, it's interesting. A friend of mine is a he runs the internship program for the accounting department at a big school. And he's created this whole, he's really turned his accounting interns into a cohort where he actually requires them, he's their faculty advisor, right? So he requires them to meet, they meet together, they discuss problems. He spent a full career at Ernst & Young as a partner before he became an academic. And so he's able to really bring in real life things. They can talk about what they're seeing together. And he's found that his students really are so deeply moved by that experience. So not just the experience of the internship, but the community they've created around it. So one of the things that I think about, and what I'd love to have you guys chat, because so many of you are using high impact practices, like what's most important to make sure that they're successful and that they're successful in building the kind of community they can. And while you're writing it down, if you could just chat in your chat, if you've got any ideas on what it takes to make them successful, I'll give you a few that we've observed from O'Donnell. And one is that they need to be supported. Both administrative and financial resources need to be put into them. They can't just be fly by night. And while they need passionate faculty, they can't just be 100% one faculty member driven. They have to be more, there has to be a little more support around it. But those passionate faculty members can make or break those high impact practices. So they need support and they need training. Oh, transparency and assignment design is a foundational. I love that, Tracy Wacker. That's great. Good mentoring, feedback, reflection. Absolutely. Those are the kinds of things that are really important. So when you think about high impact practices and building student communities across the campus, and especially when we're in the virtual world, again, structure guidelines. You have to think it through, make a plan, create a process, and then let your wonderful faculty run with it. Okay, I'm just going to have a few more, and then we're going to move to Brett on professional learning communities. So my next one is about creating inclusive practices at a campus or programmatic level. And what we've found is that inclusive practices benefit everybody. And we build inclusivity into everything we do. This is the agenda for one of our jumpstarts. Corinne was here from St. Francis College, and it just shows how we really model the best practices as we go through everything we do in all of our faculty development, and also in our support with faculty. The other thing is, Brett has really, he is a big advocate of some simple tools like inclusivity statements. Letting every student know that their voice is important and that you're going to make space for their voice is such an important way. But that should be done across a program and not just in an individual course. Accessibility checklists are a good way to making sure that everything's accessible to everyone, so that every student feels like they're part of the community. And also, Brett has something which some of you may be familiar with because we've trotted it out before. It's the Learner Connectedness Survey. And it's a survey that you provide to your students at the beginning of the session, at the beginning of the semester, that allows you to collect data on where they are, what their challenges are, whether they have accessibility issues, whether they have issues with Wi-Fi, time issues, all the different ways that you want, and it allows you to get to know them and allows you to tailor your course to students who have challenges, so you can bring them into the community. So that is it for now on the student side of community, and I'm going to turn it over to Brett for the faculty side of community. But if you have any comments, actually, we're going to do a little Padlet time.
Yeah, so let's prop this up. So let's talk about importance of fostering student community, and these are the prompts that you'll see in the Padlet. So if you could follow the link that Molly's provided, I'll go there as well, and we'll join each other, and let's see what you all come up with as far as your experience with learning communities. So how are you fostering community in your courses? How are you fostering learning or professional communities across campus? And then what challenges or barriers to widespread implementation are you facing? So course community with students, first one. The second one could be with students, and we're going to talk about professional learning communities in a moment. So if you wanted to, you could start bringing in some information about how you might be doing that with faculty roles, staff roles.
Brett, you might have to share that because, yeah, you might have set that up so that you can't talk about it.
Yeah, so, okay. Pardon me while I go into settings and confirm something. Comments on, my apologies.
Yeah, so you can comment underneath Brett's question or just create your own little chat there.
Yeah, now you can add comments within the boxes that were propped up. It's okay if you already did it elsewhere, my apologies. That's a default setting that drives me crazy in Padlet.
Yeah, we use breakout sessions an awful lot, and we really like them for any kind of community. It's like breaking people into smaller groups. And again, that's a little harder in larger classes, but it's really important that students feel like they're part of a smaller community. And when possible, sometimes taking a breakout team throughout from week to week is a really good thing to do as well.
Mixing in food, that's always an encouraging thing, especially when you're looking at food insecurity. So it's not so much of a joke, but it's always been sort of the running thing. If you can provide food, you're going to get people at meetings. I'm seeing some faculty running up against, the prescribed curriculum and how to try and fit in more community-focused aspects. Yeah, that's a reality as well. time and overload and workload. So how do you fit these things in as an additional? And we can't necessarily get into it. It's a bigger conversation, but there are ways where you can think about what you're doing and how doing community aspect elements can still drive toward those same outcomes and not be sort of additional, but part of, can substitute or become part of what you're doing. So obviously that's a more complex conversation.
I'd like it, if you look at the barriers, you have to scroll down. For some reason, things are jumping around on this today, Brett. But I like this idea of student faculty burnout leading to a desire to just do what's required and not having the energy for more. You know, we see that an awful lot in our schools and in the faculty we support. And, you know, I think that the more engaged people feel in the experience, the more they're going to want to be part of it. So finding ways to model engagement throughout everything you do. Also, one of the things we found at many of the institutions is that when we build, like the faculty that are involved in our work become a cohort, and we foster their community, and then our institutions foster their community. Corinne at St. Francis is just a master at that. And she's created a situation where there's really a FOMO of other faculty who aren't part of the cohort, who really want to be part of it. And of course, they're included and invited in. So that really helps.
FOMO, fear of missing out, if anyone's not sure. And I'm seeing in some of the responses here, you know, acknowledging that friction sometimes between trying to do things like this and then where the reward structure is for tenure and promotion. Absolutely, that's a reality. Getting buy-in, getting this to be seen as valued, where it fits into the workload space, getting you know, getting folks committed to things like this and being able to get top level support that this matters. If ideally you would be offering incentives as well as recognition. So we can talk about some of those structures that have worked, but they'll work better than others depending on budget, depending on financial times. Great.
Cool.
Okay. I'm going to jump us back here and let's go ahead and then segue into more of what we would call professional learning communities. And you'll hear me go back and forth between professional learning communities. I use that term because I like to, whenever possible, include staff and even potentially students in particular efforts that are focused on, let's say, faculty development / staff development around particular topics. So these are, you're looking at, you know, engaging faculty and staff in these types of efforts, their own learning communities. They're peer-led. You obviously want to have somebody who's qualified, but it's a peer or a near peer. It could be often a Center for Teaching and Learning director, could be a faculty associate from that unit. It could be somebody who's considered a local expert, an on-campus expert in a particular topic. Could be peer co-facilitated, could be a director of teaching and learning and somebody on a particular topic. So there's different ways that you can do that, but it's best if it's peer-led. And it's best if you, on most topics, if you don't have administrative presence, you want faculty to feel open to communicate and say what they want about particular issues. So those are just some general suggestions here. They can be cohort-based, let's say new faculty, or they can be topic-based. So we'll talk about those different models as well. It can be focused on improving or innovating, or often that's two of the same. You can put those together. So some of the benefits, you get the time, the space, and support and recognition, hopefully, to grow, to advance what you're doing, to take your primary role, in many cases teaching, and be able to go forward with it stronger and more effectively. There's camaraderie, or this term that I made up that my colleagues are giving me a bad time about, is commisery. You get to come to this space and you get this great camaraderie, but you also get to kind of share your struggles. But it's not a space to vent, and it's not a space to point fingers at folks, let's say administration, and say, well, it's their fault. It's a space to, you know, find the best of if you can and go forward as best as you can. They can be intra or interdisciplinary. So you might have something that's focusing just on a particular program. They're working together as a professional learning community. It could be related to their program outcomes and doing more effective course alignment and program alignment to the outcomes. It could be interdisciplinary, which is my favorite, because then you have folks coming together from different walks of life, so to speak, and sharing how they're approaching different things and learning from each other, because their approaches can be so different. If you have somebody from kinesiology and somebody from English talking about how they approach different projects and outcomes, they'll actually learn some things from each other. And if you think back to Carrie talking about the 3 domains and having the affective and kinesthetic being more represented, you can then get that through interdisciplinary interactions, I find, more easily. They can be individual or collective advancement of efforts. One of the things that we try and do is really prop up the scholarship of teaching and learning. So where you have that friction in the focus on teaching and the focus on research, and how sometimes, yes, we are all about teaching, but we reward research sometimes more often, or at least more visibly. Well, this is where you kind of bring the two together. If you've done a professional learning community and gone through a process of development and you've made changes, and then you do some analysis of those changes to the teaching and learning, you can then come up with some great scholarship of teaching and learning, which can hook the discipline together and also the discipline of pedagogy. And then accrediting bodies recognize this as something important. So if you are in education, nursing, business, engineering, some of those fields, this can be a really strong aspect or process. This is just an example of some of the types of topics or formats. So if you're doing faculty learning communities, it could be related to online course design. There's been a lot of focus on online course design recently. It hasn't necessarily been done in a faculty learning community because it's been very fast and large scale. You can have the early career faculty. So as they come to their tenure track position, let's say, they might have a full year program that they're doing, or there could be a faculty learning community for adjuncts as well, which is important. Women of color, you might have a book discussion group. That could be an anchored focus, which could be across multiple roles. It could be faculty, staff, and even students being involved in a forum. Inclusive teaching could be a focus, and I've been involved in some of those, and that's been really great, and really broadening what inclusivity is, and bringing all sort of populations under that and having that approach. So these are some examples here, and as you see on the lower right is as you're doing these faculty learning communities, how are you creating a space for that group, that working group, to work together in person, but also online, but also how are you also sharing beyond that community? And you could do it through newsletters, announcements, you could do it through culminating presentations and sharing of the work, or again, scholarship that might come from that group. Feel free in the chat, and I need to pull chat back up here to see if anything's popped up, but feel free to add on to anything here that you haven't seen, because there are so many other topics that can be covered. So if you want to build a professional learning community program, the ground rules, as you can see there, is it's all about openness and trust and respect and shared commitment. These are opt-in programs, ideally. They're opt-in and also hopefully incentivized. You're going to provide ideally some stipend. You're going to provide maybe some resources, technology, equipment, things like that, maybe access to additional profession development or conferences, particularly if they are going to maybe do a presentation on their outcomes at a conference, then you're going to provide support for that. So those are things that I would certainly suggest as you go into those learning communities. And let's go ahead and talk about the structure a little bit. So these tend to be now blended. They used to be primarily face-to-face, but they tend to be blended because that way you can take, let's say, this monthly meeting that happens, typically 1 to 2 hours per month or every 3 to 4 weeks. And you have that process, that cycle that takes place. And I'll get into the weekly meetings as an example, monthly meetings in a moment. But you also want to have an online space where you can continue, you can post resources, you can continue dialogue, you can use the learning management system, you can use Flipgrid in between, you can use Padlet, whatever you want to use as tools to keep people engaged in between those monthly meetings. And then these are typically 1 to 2 semesters in duration. You want to have this happen over a longer period of time because you want people to iterate and you want them to be able to approach it piece by piece and build as they go along. And I'll get more specific as we go here in a moment. This is a per meeting example. So if you're doing 1 hour a month or every few weeks, then this is an example of how you could use that time. This is what's called a guided protocol, and we have this resource for you on the last slide, and we'll forward it out to you after the session. But this is where you can have a particular topic, and I'll talk about universal design for learning because I happened to do this many times at many campuses across our CSU system. And what we would do over the course of a full academic year, and in one case, we even did it over 3 years with a group of faculty, is we'd have these monthly meetings. And then we would have it set coming into a meeting, which faculty was going to be the presenter, whose course we were going to focus on at that meeting. They then presented for approximately 5 minutes on their course, just describing the course briefly to give some grounding, naming a few of the critical course outcomes. Some of you may know of threshold concepts, however you want to term those, and then talking about how they then help students to meet those outcomes. What's the content experience around those outcomes? What's the engagement experience? What are the assignments or activities like? And then what's the assessment like? And then the other participants will just ask some clarifying questions just to get a little more understanding before they think more deeply about it. And then once that cycle has run for a few minutes, then they'll go into probing questions, which is really where the other participants will get at the why and start to ask, well, I heard you say you're doing this. Can you explain to me why you're doing it that way? And then they'll listen, they'll process, they'll take notes, and that'll go for about 10 minutes. These aren't hard set, but they're just markers, these timestamps. And then you have what's called warm or cool feedback. You can call it other things if you want to, but that's where the participants will then kind of give the highlights of the things that they see that the instructor's doing extremely well. And then they'll also give some constructive or cool feedback saying, well, I could see where there's opportunities for some enhancements here. I could see from a student perspective or somebody who's not of that major that there might be some gaps in understanding here. So these are some opportunities, and here are some ideas that I have or where you might consider further. So that'll process for a while. And then you bring it back to the instructor who presented, who then provides a recap of what they heard and what they learned and what their next steps may be. And the facilitator then help close that loop. This is a 40-minute model within a 1-hour meeting, but as you know, if you're having people gather, maybe you're serving coffee, they're coming from other meetings, you start late. And then you also might have some other tasks outside of this cycle that are about the next steps in the program, things that you're doing asynchronously, et cetera. So that's the model that we've used that's worked really well, just to provide consistent structure from meeting to meeting so that things are processed fairly equally across the different faculty presenting. So we would do that over the course of the semester, and they're making changes to their course along the way. And then the following term is where they're then implementing all of those changes to their course. And we would collect pre-data on their courses at the beginning of this cycle, prior to the cycle, and then we would collect post-data. And we actually found a lot of good information about the impact on course GPAs, course completion rates, closing equity gaps, teacher efficacy, student satisfaction. So we have a lot of data that we've collected in that regard with our professional learning communities. So looking at gauging the effectiveness, I already kind of gave away a few of these, but you've got the participant satisfaction, you've got their efficacy in regard to their teaching now, ways it may have changed, impact on student outcomes. You can use those institutional outcomes, the institutional data outcomes that I mentioned. You can also look at student satisfaction. And then the scholarly output is another one. So how are the folks that were involved creating their individual scholarship within their field, or even collaborating interdisciplinarily to produce some scholarship on the outcomes of their process, their key takeaways and the outcomes that they saw. So just to run through there on a general model for PLCs, let's say at a campus scale, but I'll also talk about how you might do this large scale. Just maybe in the chat, are any of you in a role where you work full-time or part-time across campuses or collaborate with others in a system, let's say? Because I can talk about how we did this ultra large scale in the California State University system. And I see that Jerry Hanley had to drop off. I wanted to tip my hat to him because he was actually my boss. And the 4 names you see here are my colleagues who developed this program under Jerry's leadership, Jerry Hanley. And we actually, back in 2011 and 2012, we looked at over 1 million course sections in one semester, and we identified the courses that were most problematic as far as DFW rate. And we decided to go after those courses and close equity gaps and improve graduation rates and course completion rates. So we looked at those most problematic courses, but then we found instructors who were actually doing well in those courses as far as student success. We propped those instructors up as leads, and then we ran these professional learning communities within their discipline cohorts, but also across this very large group of over 100 faculty per year. And we brought them into a week-long faculty development institute. DFW, thanks for explaining that. We brought them into a summer institute in person for 4 to 5 days, set the context, set up a strong program around all the things we wanted to accomplish, gave them a lot of workshops, gave them a lot of space to dialogue with each other. And that was one of the biggest benefits that people always say with these programs is you allowed us to talk to one another. You gave us space for that. And that doesn't happen often enough. Department meetings are often, agenda driven and problem driven. So this is something we had a lot of success with, and we had over 800 faculty participate over 5 cycles. And we actually ended up with over 700 teaching e-portfolios. And this is where they gathered information, shared information about their course as it was, and then documented changes along the way over this full year-long program, and then focused on the outcomes of the new course model that they implemented, the changes they made, and the data they collected from students, their own responses, and then also institutional data. And we did see across the board the trend in increased course GPA, completion rates, and closing of equity gaps. So I'll just, we have the link in the chat there, and I'll just show you a snapshot of what you can find very briefly, and then we'll jump back. So this is our course redesign with technology program. You can browse by discipline, or you can just search if you wanted to by key term. Again, over 700 of those, and you can see the article if you wanted more information, if this was something of interest to do these at scale. Okay, but I know not everybody's working across a large system, but these are definitely scalable. And after that institute, we also had them meet monthly in online professional learning communities across the whole group, but they met in cohort groups bi-weekly so they could focus on their cohort specific topic areas and issues they wanted to work on. Okay, so let's pause and go into some closing discussion. So what are you doing to build community and improve the student, faculty, staff experience? What are the things haven't we talked about, or what can you share related to community at the different levels we've talked about today? This is where you can do it in chat or do a raise hand, and we'll get you on mic if you want to. And then also any questions you may have still. We can do that now as well.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of interaction during the session, so.
Great. And Tracy, I see you have a consortium of higher institutions in your city. Yeah, feel free to share anything you've been doing, or if you want to reach out to me specifically related to what we did at that larger scale. Again, we did it across 23 campuses with 800 faculty serving, I forget what the total count was, tens of thousands of students.
Yeah, Brett, Phil's comment that offering workshops, but sometimes it's difficult to gauge what types of workshops to offer because of low response on faculty surveys. And that's a tough one.
Yeah, in my experience, what we did, Phil, was we had not just our leadership group of a few of us that developed the program. We didn't just say this is the way it should be done and drop it down on the system, but we actually involved, we have a faculty development council in the California State University system. So at least one representative from each campus. So we got input from all the faculty development directors, the directors of academic technology. We had instructional designers, we had faculty, we had provosts, associate provosts. So we had a lot of groupthink that was happening to really shape this, and also following a lot of the literature that's out there for those that are steeped in professional development activities and literature. So that was our approach to try and come up with the best model. But we also allowed, again, a lot of space for the faculty to drive the conversation within their subgroups. And that's what they loved the most. Consistently, faculty always tell us the #1 thing about your program was letting us talk to each other. No matter how much we fed them, the stipends we gave, putting up in the hotels, they loved being supported to talk to each other.
Yeah, and I like the, Janet, you're doing a cohort group of 25 to learn how to improve their online courses. That's the typical format of the boot camps that we give called Jumpstart. And faculty really get to know each other if you create a combination of what we call learn by doing, learn while doing, where you've got some synchronous sessions, you've got some asynchronous learning materials, and then you've got activities that they're working on and working together on. That really makes a huge difference. So Yeah, that's great. Inviting faculty that were identified by students to be as effective. You know, like faculty showcases, share what you do and do well, and comment on each other's is a really great way to get faculty involved. But they have to be a little bit already a cohort. That works much better if they actually have some reason that they already want to be together. So there's a lot of different ways that you are all creating faculty learning communities. So this really, I hope you learned something, because we have a group here who's pretty experienced in a lot of the methods that we've talked about today, but sometimes it's just good to just kind of get out of the mode and think about it and think about how you can move forward. So Brett, do you want to, should we wrap it?
Yeah, let's go ahead and move on to just a snapshot of the takeaway resources. So you'll have access to the Padlet if there's anything you wanted to review from there that your colleagues posted. We'll give you the guided protocol for the faculty learning community, kind of that timeline that I showed within the meetings. And then also we have a document for how you can prepare for the faculty learning community. If you wanted to go deeper, and I wanted to at least acknowledge Milton Cox, who started the faculty learning community model. This model started back in 1979, but really started taking off in the late 90s. So they have a journal, and actually their website has a lot of great information, and other institutions now have their own websites to support this. The article I gave a snapshot of earlier, you have the link there, and then also you have the link to the website that has all of those e-portfolios of the results, what faculty did with their efforts.
And we'll be sending this to you
in
an email in the next couple of days.
All right, so we'll close out from there. Our contact info is there. Follow us, contact us, whatever works best for you.
Yeah, we're always like to stay in touch. Yeah. Okay, I just want to make a little quick call to action here. So we're putting together a platform called called Nectar, and it is a platform to help faculty evolve and improve, continually evolve and improve the learning experience. It's got 3 pieces of it. We've already rolled out Learn, which is we use in conjunction with our faculty development work and with our internal training for our large team of designers. So the platform itself is going to have microlearning, interactive mini design apps that allow faculty to actually walk through different things, like creating a more humanized syllabus, creating a course welcome page, creating different types of project-based learning. They can see exemplars of other faculty in different content areas that are similar to theirs, and they can see what other people are doing. So there are libraries of exemplars, tools, and templates, and it's basically a community of practice. And in an individual campus, there'll be a community manager and access to our virtual staff of designers as part of the Nectar experience. But while we're rolling it out, we're building our own learning community to help us, and we're calling it a design panel, to help us design and test Nectar as we roll it out. And we're looking for academic leaders, heads of centers of CTL, deans, heads of academic affairs, and provosts, so people in the provost's office. We're also really looking for some instructional designers and instructional technologists to join our panel, and for faculty. So it's going to be a panel of about 100 members, and it's a community we're going to run in the next several months. And we'll leave a link to it if anyone's interested in participating. Will be a link to our recruiting questionnaire. We're putting the panel together now. We want a really well-balanced and great group. So please consider it. And last but not.
Awesome. You got Sandy. And oops, there we go. So yeah, we'll just give you a sneak peek of our next webinar on February 17th. We'll be talking about Propel and how that is a platform that drives learner success through purposeful instructor support.
Yeah, we'll be talking about how do you support instructors and what are some good support models. And this is going to be a really interactive, almost a round table, because what we're going to look for is we're really building this a model we're calling it the faculty concierge model. And we'd love to hear how you're doing it and how you see that working. So great. Anyone is interested in we'll send an email that'll tell you we'll give you a link if you're interested in the Nectar panel. We'll give you a registration link to our next session. and give you all these resources. And we're so thrilled to have every one of you here and joining us. And by the way, if you have any ideas for what you want us to explore next, please just shoot a note or email to Brett or I, or just contact us through our website. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Oh, the name Next